What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Chuds BBQ. My name is Bradley Robinson, and today I'm going to show you how I cooked these delicious, smoky, tender pork spare ribs. Roll it! These are pork spare ribs. When you're at the grocery store, there's typically two kinds of ribs that you're gonna run into. And they are baby back ribs, which is the bony backside of the pork loin, and then the pork spare ribs, which is the bony backside of the pork belly. So that's the real difference between the two ribs. Is one is loin meat, which is really lean and really small, and one is belly meat on a bone, which is nice and fatty and much better for barbecue, especially if you're a beginner, because they're a lot more forgiving. A third very common rib you're going to run into is St. Louis cut, which is this same cut of spare rib, except completely squared off like that. So it doesn't have the chine bone or any of this rib tip meat. So the pork spare rib is pretty simple. You got all your ribs, there's a membrane on the ribs, you got this skirty flat meat right here, you got the chine bone right here, and other than that, it's just a matter of trimming it up, squaring it up, getting rid of all the thin bits, and making this thing look beautiful and ready for the smoker. First thing I always do on a rack of spare ribs is trim off this skirty flat meat right here. Just because it's not gonna cook up well, it's gonna dry out. You'll get patches of rub in places you don't want them. And this is good meat. I always save this for throwing into a batch of sausage or making pork burgers or something like that. Next thing I like to do is take off the chine bone. And if you look right at the end here, you can see it right there. And there's this piece of cartilage, and then the gap, and then the chine bone. So that lets me know where to start my cut. And it's just a square bone, so it's just a matter of following that line at the same angle. And there we go. This is a great piece of meat on here too. Oftentimes I'll just throw this on the smoker for a little snacky while we're going, but if not, I'll just take the knife and cut this meat off of this bone here. And that's another great piece of meat, good piece of fat for sausage or what have you. So go to the save pile. This is bone and some cartilage, great for saving, smoking up, making stock. I usually just stick it in the freezer. When I have enough of them, I'll make a delicious smoky batch of pork stock. Next thing to talk about is the membrane. A lot of people like to take it off. I think it's best left on just because there's so much fat underneath it that if you pull it off, you're going to take a lot of fat with it. And fat is very helpful in the cooking process. And if you leave it on, the fat will render underneath the membrane and stay in there. It'll kind of confit the rib meat all the way through. And as long as you're cooking on a smoker with good convection, this will crisp up and be completely edible. So I like to leave it on. Also, one less step. All right, next thing I'm gonna do is come down to this end here and find the very last rib bone, because this one's super tiny. She's tiny. And I'm gonna just square this end off. Again, great meat. There is some bones in some of this. That's kind of hard to chunk out, but like that's all boneless. Great for the save pile. This save for stock or throw it into the firebox, get a little extra flavor. Your call. So now this thing is looking real nice. I'm just gonna shape it out because this is real thin at the end here and it'll burn up. So I'm just gonna kind of follow this cut all the way down. And I'm just looking for a good shape right now. And that is pretty much there. Just a nicely shaped, good looking rack of ribs. You always want to get one with the best marbling you can find because it'll cook up nice and juicy and moist. And that's it. Nice looking rack of spare ribs. Nice and wide. We'll get some big ribs out of this. Nicely cleaned up. The skirt is off. So now all there's left to do is season it up and throw it on the pit. So when it comes to seasoning a rack of ribs, I've tried it all. I used to use a lot of slathers, make a lot of really complex rubs, but I found over time that all the granulated paprikas and garlic powders and whatnot just kind of make a bit of a barrier that the smoke can't get direct contact with the meat. And I found you get better color if you just go simple with salt and pepper. So that's what I'm gonna do today. I've never had too much issue having salt adhere to this either. And if you do have a particularly dry rack, you can always just let the salt sit on for a minute. That'll draw out some moisture and that'll help the pepper stick. But I'm just looking for a real even coat of salt on this. If this was a thinner rack, I may go a little thicker with the salt on this part, a little lighter down there, but pretty even coverage all the way around. And I'm gonna let that sit for a minute to help the pre-ground pepper stick. This is the only YouTube channel in the world that'll suggest using pre-ground pepper instead of freshly cracked. Fresh cracked is just a little too strong, and for the amount of pepper we're gonna put on this, fresh cracked would be a little overkill. All right, that salt has done its trick. It's been about 10 minutes, and that's just gonna help get a nice even coverage on this here rack of ribs. This is 16 mesh black pepper. All right, it's looking real nice. On they go. We're gonna do it this way. Always aim the thickest end towards the fire where it's hotter. And then, yeah, not quite at the end because there's also tends to be a hot spot right at the end. So kind of right where the thermometer is where this rack of ribs is gonna live for the next little bit. Still just got those 2 logs in that pile of charcoal that I started with. Right now it is 226. Love that little trick. Thanks, A. Frank. 230. This pit is rocking right at 300 degrees, which is where I typically cook ribs, even on a pit this size. Pretty hot, but the ribs can take it. Clean smoke. Still just got these 2 logs going in here. And we'll come back in a little bit. It is now 3:43. So a little over an hour in. This temp is just dipping below 275. And these 2 little logs have just done so well for me. So looking in here, yeah, they're pretty toast. So we're gonna throw a couple more in and we'll come back in a bit. All right, it is now 5:16. And I still have got very little done on this mini Chud box that I swore I would get done today. It's one of those days, in case of the Mondays. We're rocking a solid 250 still, and I'm gonna flip these over. This is looking pretty good. So now I'm just gonna toast up this backside, get some color on this membrane, crisp that up a little bit, probably throw another log on, and then in about another hour or so, we'll flip it over and start spritzing. All right, it is now damn near 7 o'clock. And it's time to throw another couple of logs on. So let's get that going. That is log 6 and 7 thus far. Now it's time to make a little spritz. Got some good old-fashioned apple cider vinegar going in. Unless you spill it all over the place. Some beautiful honey. That's it. All right, so the plan from here on out is to flip these over now that this backside is nicely cooked. Ooh, these are feeling real nice. From here on out for the next 30 minutes to an hour or so, we're gonna use this apple cider vinegar honey mixture, and we're just gonna spritz this every so often. And what that's gonna do is create a nice glaze with that honey, and so we get a nice sheen and a nice bit of sweetness on these ribs before we wrap them up and finish them off. Look at those beauties. This is spritz number like 5 or 6. All right, it is 8:19. And for those of you keeping score at home, these are rocking at about 185-ish. So these are pretty much good. So what I'm gonna do now is wrap them up in some foil, let them finish cooking for another maybe 20 minutes, and then give them a rest, and we'll slice into them. Ba-bam! First, we gotta wrap them up Hit them with a little sauce, a little Leroy and Lewis Beet barbecue sauce. On sale now at LeroyandLewis.com. Come on, tell me that doesn't look amazing. Put a little sauce on the back. Ooh, yeah. I'm also gonna put a little bit of melted butter in here as well. Just a little bit though. Because what doesn't sound delicious about honey butter glazed ribs? Am I right? I think I'm right. These ribby ribs are done. Let's see what they're reading. Oh my God, that smells amazing. Yeah, we're right around the 200 mark. Now we're gonna let them rest for as long as we can, or until they reach an internal temperature of around probably 150. Oh, these have rested for a good 30, 40 minutes. Nice and cool, ready to be sliced. Now there's two types of people in this world. Bone side up and bone side down. I recommend bone side up. Really get to see what you're doing. This is really what you're looking for with some ribs. Nice glaze, nice and smoky, good smoke ring. And nice and tender. Also, the long rest is a really good tip for making sure the texture comes out right on these ribs. If you eat them piping hot, they'll fly right off the bones. And a long rest can help save you to get that nice bite through texture. Oh, let's see how she is. Perfect. Nice and tender, right to the bone. Sweet, but not too sweet. Savory, salty, delicious. And I gotta say, you can do this with any variation. I typically go with maple syrup. Sometimes I just throw some brown sugar on top. But the real trick is just to add sugar towards the end of the cooking process so it doesn't burn too much. And you'll always end up with some beautiful, nice, red, delicious spare ribs. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please just let me know in the comments below if you have any questions or concerns or what have you. And let me know what you want to see me do next. And until I see you next time, please go cook something outside. Peace!